Welcome to The Blended. My name is Eric. We're back with number 4. Dang, consistency. Oh my goodness. It's crazy when you think of what do you think about when you think about biological warfare?
Well, I think of like actual warfare, like guns and battle and like full definition. But you're coming from the internal warfare of navigating a blended family. And you're actually going to debate something that I think a lot of people would argue, and that is that you feel there should be no different treatment between biological children and children that are not biologically yours.
There's a false narrative out there that says the parent that has that biological attachment to the child would do that. And I've never met one, and hopefully I've never meet a person that would do something that would be completely out of scope or completely different in how they would do their own child. Now don't get me wrong now. Different personalities call for different procedures, right? Different personalities. You don't treat, I think it's also a false narrative to say that I treat everyone the same. But that wouldn't make sense either, right?
Yeah.
Because some of my kids needed a little bit more firmness than others. Some of them didn't need octaves raised because that would demoralize them a little bit, right?
Break them down.
That would break them down, right? But then others excelled when you put some steam under their butt. I think the topic of this conversation and why it's called biological warfare is because the communication aspect of that is when the war comes. So you have, whether it be the wife or the husband of the biological child, or for these purposes, it's in my case scenario, it was my biological daughter saying to me that she felt that she was being treated differently.
You're saying that your biological daughter would see the way you would treat your wife's daughters and say, you make it more difficult for me because I'm your biological child and the standards are different.
At first, I should take it nonchalantly when she'd say that, and I would be very cavalier, and I would be kind of like, yeah, I'm your daddy, and this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm raising you to be successful. These are the decisions that I'm making. But I remember there came a time when I probably paid attention to her a little bit more, and she probably gave me that eyes like, you cannot dismiss what I'm getting ready to have a conversation with you. And that probably meant she was a little older and we were having one of those daddy-daughter conversations that you feel like, okay, she's coming into womanhood and she's gonna let you know if you're being dismissive.
So how did you move forward? How did you address the fact that you, even though you wanted to treat children the same, it turns out you actually weren't following through with that?
Some of the things you just can't control. Like I couldn't control my standard that I would impose on my children, my biological children. That would not be challenged, right? Some of those things I just had to tell her matter-of-factly, I'm sorry, but this is the reality that we live in right now. Other things, I conceded. I tried to make the best possible decisions, but some things against my own will, against my own me thinking that it was right, I kind of changed for her.
There is no, we're going to argue this point, there is no compromise because this is my child. You don't have that same swagger, authority, so on and so forth, etc., with children that are not yours. So can you truthfully say that you can treat all children the same?
Yeah, you can say you can treat all children the same because all children want the same. They want a loving adult, right? They want someone who's going to love them, who's going to show them right from wrong. So right from wrong is always right from wrong. If you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, you're right. So there is no lying, stealing, cheating, cursing, how you deal with boys, how you deal with men, how you deal with girls. These things are are lessons that I was taught and lessons that I pass on. So the lessons are the same. So when you think about it, it's like this. It's not to compare children to property, but that level of territorial is a little different, right? So for example, my stepkids, and everyone knows me, knows I don't refer to children that I raise as stepkids, but for the matter of this podcast, I'll say, we'll stipulate them as stepkids. I didn't have the authority. So I guess to answer your question, yes, she had a true feeling that at some points she was being treated differently. Yes. But then I've had my stepchildren say they felt like they were being treated differently. But it's pretty funny when you're dealing with young people, how most times when you feel like you're being treated differently, most times there's a background of some discipline going on. Right? Most times when the I'm being treated differently card is coming, right? It's because maybe my octaves are a little louder with you. Maybe I pulled out the bag of, my daughter's not gonna like me on this one, but maybe I kind of brought that chin closer to me, because maybe I didn't think you were hearing me. And so when it was time to be disciplined, there was a difference. And do I regret that? I guess so. Only because I didn't have the authority to do that. Now,
with your stepchildren?
With my stepchildren.
Okay.
That don't mean that there were some times that I didn't step over that authority, because I was raising them. And because I was raising them, I might have stepped over that authority sometimes because I was being a dad and I needed to show them, hey, this is how a dad reacts. Even if it was in my mind, based on what I've seen growing up, how a dad reacts, right? So that was part of my goal in raising my stepkids. Hey, this is how a dad responds to you when you have these behaviors. This is how a dad loves on you when you have these behaviors. This is how a dad showers you with gifts, these behaviors. So everything that I did for my biological children, I did for my stepchildren. The navigation is huge because it's not just discipline. It can be love, right? So, for example, depending on their age group, they can see a level of comfortableness that we have with our biological children. So you can see me and my daughter like to fight, right? I'm a fitness trainer. I come from a boxing background. So my goal was always to teach my girls how to fight. And me and my daughter would wrestle at a fever pitch. Like we would wrestle hard in the house. And so there was times where I can see maybe the younger one and the older one sometimes look on and say they want some of that jousting. And there was times that I just couldn't give them that, right? I remember the younger one, she was younger. I remember her wanting to, jump on my shoulders, and there was just some boundaries that you have to create, especially early in the game, right? Especially early in this relationship that we're all having and that's new, that you have to create some of these boundaries. Where with my biological child, I didn't have to create boundaries.
Why do you say that was a boundary that needed to be created?
You need the boundaries in the beginning because you have a lioness that's looking on, all right? Like, and the lioness being my wife, right? Like, she's looking on at her cubs all day, every day. And not only that, you have to make sure that this horrible world that we live in, that can be horrible sometimes, you have to make sure these young women are having habits that are going to make them successful in the world, right? So I'm new in their lives. I'm a man in their lives, and there's just certain habits that you just can't create until you develop the relationship of trust.
The example has to be set because she needs to know what's appropriate with a man that you just met.
Absolutely. And so getting back to how that might make them feel different, right? They might call that you don't love me, right? Because they're seeing in a different level of affection. And so it was always a challenge, whether it was verbal or nonverbal. It was always a challenge to look at, I can almost read their mind of what they're saying because their nonverbal expressions are as loud as their verbal expressions, right? So I could almost read what they're thinking. And there was times that I may be playing with my daughter and kind of say, I gotta use the bathroom, and then stop. Because I understood that at that moment, because they weren't getting that affection, they were longing for it. And so the loving aspect of me, the protector of me, as we talked about, would say, okay, let me stop that. But as your kids get older, guess what? My biological daughter is probably saying, why'd you just stop? Maybe she was getting in tune in some of those delays in response. School. I mean, there's times in a relationship like this where you have, let's say my biological daughter is getting ready to play in a soccer game. Let's say my stepdaughter is getting ready to play in a championship game. What did I had to teach priority. You know, how did she feel when I said, I'm getting ready, I gotta go watch this championship? Because I was very clear in my words, and my words would be, listen, we're family, we're circle, we take care of each other. She needs to be supported in her championship game. Now, as an adult, that sounds reasonable. And as a 13-year-old girl, not so reasonable.
It's like any other relationship, right? You can look at your wife and say, God, I love you, but I don't like you right now.
Right, I'm aggravated.
I mean, I just do not like you. I don't want to see your face. I love you. Am I going anywhere?
Right.
This relationship is set in stone, but boy, I can't be in the same room with you right now.
Right.
Right?
Right, absolutely.
And that feeling is different to your biological children than it is to your stepchildren, because again, we're talking about condition.
Right.
There's that condition feeling like love either way, either end of this relationship is conditional. I can be removed, it can be added at any time, and that's a scary, vulnerable feeling.
Right. Absolutely, and that would, when I say I like you, I love you, but I don't like you right now, but I never was able to make you, I'm not allowed to make you feel that way because you're a child, right? And if I did, I apologize, right? You caught me in a vulnerable situation, and so the complexity of that is no joke. And it doesn't stop when they get older. Perfect example, me and my daughter was working out the other day, my quote-unquote stepdaughter, and we work out a few days a week. And my other daughter's in college. We were all pumped up, so I said, let's take a picture. So I'm getting ready to send that picture to my girl to put on Instagram and do all of that. And I looked and as I'm getting ready to hit enter, I'm like, oh, you tripping. You tripping right now. So what do? I have to go through, because my daughter's away to college. I had to go through our pictures. Last time she was down here, we worked out. So I had to go through the pictures, make sure I had a picture of her in there, boom. So this way I'm able to say, okay, Fit Fam is all of us. My biological, my step, and I even threw my wife in there, for good measures. It's a standard that I've set. But I would be lying if I didn't say somebody would give me you remember that word from the first show, the snargly look? Yeah, somebody would have given me the snargly look. I mean, they're grown now, so most likely they're not going to speak it. Right, so why enter into that? Like, I'm not trying to enter into that biological warfare. I'm trying to stay away from it. Yeah, don't start now, won't be no static, So, yeah, so I'm like, you know what, let me just do this.
But when you talk about biological warfare, you're not just talking about biological warfare with your children. You're talking about biological warfare also with your wife. Because I'm sure there were times when you did something to the biological children that she looked at you and went, Whereas that same treatment of your biological child, she was like, I can't say anything.
It's just that I feel like there's a difference in a level of protection that she has for her babies that don't have my last name. I feel like there's a level of protection that's just laid into women or fathers that are in these positions. I'm gonna make sure that these young women, young kids, young girls understand a dad's role. And please don't get in the way of that, right? Please don't let your fears, like you fell in love with me, you brought me into the den, and then you said, I honor you and respect you enough to have some kids with you, so I trust you, right? And so I think some of the biological warfare was, please stop trying to do my job. Hey, when you decide that you love someone, you've done the research on them, you understand that their background is impeccable as it pertains to any babies and kids, and you say, this is the man I want to lead my family, then you must let him lead. And you got to use your card, your get out of jail card, which means the shut down card. You got to use that sparingly, because the kids will adapt to his role unless you allow them to always bring out the get out of jail free card, right? When you allow the kids to continue to pull out that card, then they know, okay, you only have authority up to this point. And there were some times that my wife would say, hey, all right, let's talk about this. And there was a few times where it was like, this is non-negotiable for me, but not because it's non-negotiable because those are my kids. It's non-negotiable because maybe I was doing the most, right? Maybe I was on a run and I'm like, no, 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 no. Or my wife would say to me, hey babe, listen, there's a compromise to be had here. I don't think you're seeing it. Okay, super open to that. I may not have act like I was open at the moment, but you know, hindsight being 2020, okay, yeah, that was the right way to go. With trial and error, anytime that we stayed together, anytime we had those nice night conversations, some debates, mild arguments, and we listened to each other, and there was reason behind it. I believe everyone came out stronger for it, and I look at my girls now, and they're strong. And do they look at me sometimes with the look like, dang, you messed that up, Dad? Yeah, of course. I mean, I find myself randomly apologizing, you know, and saying, you know what, I apologize. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to. I could have said yes to that. And I let my kids know I made mistakes. But hindsight, you know, I'm batting 700. You know what I'm saying? That's the blended, baby.